Terms of external features of bone. The external features in all bones either one of two things, either bone elevations or bone depressions, canals and openings. Let us explain first bone elevations. This is first of all head. Head, like this head, is the rounded end of the bone. This rounded end of the bone is called the head, not necessarily directed upward, like this. In this bone in the forearm, these are the bones of the forearm, and this bone in the forearm, its head is directed downward. Its head is directed downward. Neck. Neck is a constriction. Just follow the head. Therefore, this rounded large elevation is called the head, not necessarily directed upward. And the neck is a constriction just below. And process. Process is elongated elevation, like this elongated elevation, which has blunt end or point end. It has a blind end, blunt in shape. Therefore, this elevation, which is having a blunt end, this is process. Process is elongated projection with blunt end, while the same elongated projection with pointed end. Elongated projection with pointed end is called spine. Therefore, spine is elevation with pointed end, while process is like this. This is a process. Process is this is a typical process. Elongated projection with blunt end. Then we have three terms, three rounded localized elevation. Three rounded localized elevation, which are: if small elevation called tubercle, if medium elevation called tuberosity, if large elevation called trochanter. This example for the smallest. Small elevation, tubercle. This is the largest elevation, called trochanter. Trochanter. In between there is tuberosity. Tuberosity like this. Medium elevation, tuberosity. Or this tuberosity, medium elevation, tuberosity. Here there is a comparison between the three elevations, between tubercle, tuberosity, and trochanter. Actually, in this bone, this is called tuberosity or tubercle, and this typical example for tuberosity, and this typical example also is called tuberosity. Therefore, localized rounded elevation, if small called tubercle, if medium called tuberosity, if large called trochanter. condyle. Condyle, this is the typical condyle. What is this meaning? Convex, articular elevation, used for articulation. Convex elevation, used as articular surface. This is condyle. Epicondyle, we take before that epi means just above. Therefore, this just above the condyle and just above the articular surface is called epicondyle. Also in this bone, which is the humerus, these are considered as, can be considered as condyles. Large convexity articular. Just above the articular and just above the condyles are epicondyles. Two epicondyles. Hamulus. Hamulus mean elevation in the bone, hook-like, like this hamulus. This is called the hamulus because it is hook-like. Cornea. Cornea. There is lesser and greater cornea. Lesser mean smaller. Greater means bigger. Cornea means the curved, bony process. Horn-like, like the horn. Curved, bony process, like a horn. Crest. This is the typical crest, this red line. Crest mean elongated ridge. Very, very long. Elongated ridge. Usually on the top of the bone. Like this ridge on the top of this large bone. This is the typical crest. Elongated ridge usually on the top of the bone. What is the meaning of ridge? Ridge mean linear elevation. Ridge mean linear elevation. Line. Line means slight elevation or slightly rough linear landmark like this. This very, very large elevation called trochanter, and this small elevation also called the trochanter, greater trochanter and lesser trochanter. And this line, this landmark which connect between the two trochanter is called the intertrochanteric line. Line means just elevated or just rough linear landmark on the bone, means line. Border. Border like this anterior border of the humerus, this medial and lateral border of the humerus. These borders separate between two surfaces and may be sharp, like this sharp border, or rounded border. Separate the surface. This is the same bone, this is the humerus. It has anterior blunt border. Separate between two surfaces. My fingers on the surfaces. And on the back, these borders, sharp borders, separate this surface from the other surfaces. Therefore, it is called the border. Border separating surfaces may be sharp or blunt, like this. These are the terms of bone elevations. Then let us take bone depressions, grooves, canals. First of all, fossa. Fossa is a large depression on the surface. This fossa in the lower part of femur. Large depression on the surface. If there is a small depression on the surface, this small depression called the fovea. Notch like this notch. Notch is a semicircular. The red line and the great line notch is a semicircular depression on the surface or a border, like this large notch or this small notch. While fossa, depression on the surface, like this fossa. Depression on surface called the fossa, while depression on border is called the notch. Incisura. Incisura is a notch-like depression on a border. The typical incisura not on a bone. The typical incisura on the stomach. This border of stomach is called lesser curvature. And on this border there is a small notch called the incisura. Therefore, very small notch on a border is called incisura. Groove or sulcus. This is the typical groove or sulcus. Groove or sulcus means elongated depression. Elongated depression, like this groove or sulcus. Fissure. Fissure is a longitudinal cleft between flat bones. Flat bones, the most famous area for flat bone is the skull. Like this cleft between the flat bone. This is called fissure. Fissure is a longitudinal cleft between flat bone. This is like this longitudinal cleft. Hiatus. Hiatus is a narrow gap or passage. Any gap or passage has two openings, beginning and end. Hiatus means narrow gap with one end is seen and the other end is hidden, like this in the skull. This is part of a skull, and here there are two openings. These are called hiatus. Where is the other opening for this passage? Hidden inside the skull. Therefore, if there is canal or passage, narrow canal or passage with one end is seen and the other end is hidden, this is called hiatus. Like this hiatus in the skull. Also in this picture and in this part of skull there is impression. Impression means depression or indentation made by a certain structure. Like in this part of skull, this impression made by trigeminal ganglion and called trigeminal impression. this impression, indentation. Foramen. Oh, foramen, this is a typical example. The base of skull full of foramens everywhere in the skull, like this large foramen. This foramen simply is a hole in the bone. Aperture. Aperture is a large foramen like this. This is called aperture. Canal. Canal is a passage. Canal is a passage with both ends are opened and seen, like this canal. This bone is called the sacrum, and this canal, and this is the beginning of the canal, and this is the end of the canal. The canal passes inside the bone, inside the sacrum, and comes out from here. Therefore, canal is a passage with two opened ends. Canal has two open ends. Meatus, like this. Meatus canal, but one end is closed, like your ear. This meatus open from one side, and the other side is closed by the eardrum. These are the terms of bones related to elevations and related to depressions, grooves, and canal. Thank you for good listening and good luck.